What's going on, you guys? You're tuned into the Cutting Room Knife Review. I'm your host, Garrett, and today I have to ask you guys the age-old question. What faction are you? Are you Spyderco? Or are you Benchmade? What's up, guys? I'm Garrett. You're tuned into the Cutting Room Knife Review, where I review knives, blades, and all things sharp. Please like and subscribe so I can keep bringing you more killer knife content. You know, in the knife collecting world, it's kind of a serious question. People can take the competition between the two, or the rivalry between the two companies, very seriously. Now, really, it's all in good fun. But most people, you do find that they're either Spyderco people or they're Benchmade people. Not a lot of times does somebody not have a preference between the two and not lean heavily into one company or the other once they start collecting knives. But both Benchmade and Spyderco are basically the two largest high-end knife producers in the United States. They aren't the highest end knife producers in the United States, but as far as making very large runs of production knives and basically having the respect of the knife community as to be, very good, if not high end, models of knives. They both are the two biggest companies. Now, this model, the Benchmade 940 Osbourne, is one of the all-time classic pocket knives. It is 25 years old. It was released in the year 2000, and it has been a mainstay of pocket knives ever since then. And there's a reason that this knife has stuck around that long. Truth be told, it's a good knife. It is not a bad knife, and it would not have lasted this long if it had been a bad knife. Is it outdated? Well, that's to be debated. And is it, up to today's standards of knives? Once again, that's kind of up to the operator. But lots of people still love this knife. It still sells, and it's still worth reviewing and, touching on as, a knife reviewer. I would be remiss to not include this knife as part of my knife reviewing journey with you guys, because it definitely has a place in pocket knives and knife collecting. And, truth be told, I'm a Spyderco guy. Through and through. I don't own any Benchmade knives other than this knife. But as far as Benchmade goes, either this knife or the Bug Out are probably the quintessential Benchmade knives. And when I think of Benchmade, I really think of the 940 Osbourne. This is the knife that I think of when I think of Benchmade knives. It is the only Benchmade knife that I own, and really, to tell you the truth, the reason that it's the only Benchmade knife that I own is because I am about to replace this blade with an REK Knives reblade. And it is going to be absolutely awesome. I will have basically a Frankenstein Osbourne, or no longer really a 940 Osbourne. It will be a different knife with the 940 Osbourne frame, lock, and scales until I replace the scales. Much like my REK Shaman is not much of a Spyderco anymore. But before that blade comes in tomorrow and I change this knife forever, I thought that I would take a look at this knife, a deep dive, if you will, into one of the all-time classic American pocket knives, and definitely one of the all-time classic modern American pocket knives. So let's get into the materials and specifications that make up the Benchmade 940 Osbourne. So the Benchmade Osbourne is both classic, traditional, and very unique and of its own style, all in the same. It's just a 940 Osbourne. There's not too many knives like this. So the overall length of this knife is 7.87 inches. It's a rather long knife. Now, the blade to handle ratio is, there's a whole lot of blade, to tell you the truth. The blade length is 3.4 inches. The blade thickness is 0.12 inches at the thickest, but as we can see, it definitely has some milling done to the spine of the blade, so it's not that thick all the way through the knife. It has a flat grind on it, and it has a 4.47 inch handle, the handle thickness being 0.44, so it's relatively thin, like we see with a lot of crossbar lock knives. It's 2.65 ounces, so it is incredibly light. That's one of the things that Benchmade is definitely known for, is very light knives. Oftentimes it's the handle that they use and the locking mechanism is not very substantial, even though it is strong. So they have made themselves famous for these very, pretty like strong knives that don't weigh very much. Now, this model of 940 Osbourne is basically the base model. It has S30V steel for the blade. It has a G10 for the scales, and under it has a steel liner that is nested into the G10 scales that houses this axis lock, which is what Benchmade calls their crossbar lock. And Benchmade is not the inventor of the crossbar lock, but the men that did invent the crossbar lock sold their patent to Benchmade in 1999. And Benchmade was the only knife company that had crossbar locks, or what they called an axis lock, for the longest time. I think it was 2018 when that patent finally expired, and other companies were able to then use the axis lock, or a crossbar lock with omega springs. Now, knife companies did use basically the same idea, but with a different mechanism. Mainly, you're going to see it with the ball bearing lock from Spyderco's Manix 2, and then you will also see the ram lock from Microtech. Both do not utilize the same kind of spring as the axis lock does, but most other crossbar locks and traditional crossbar locks are the omega spring crossbar lock that is Benchmade's axis lock. So the 940 Osbourne comes in a variety of scales. You can get aluminum from the factory. You can also get carbon fiber from the factory. It comes in a couple different blade steels, S30V being the base. It also comes in S90V, MagnaCut, and M4, I believe, are the choices that you can get for the steel. They're all unique and pretty good choices. Benchmade doesn't quite dwell into the murky waters of all the crazy steels that Spyderco does. And honestly, that's one of the things that I find kind of boring about Benchmade, is that they utilize basically a lot of the same steels for all their different knives. And one thing that's really refreshing about Spyderco is their tendency to make sprint runs of knives with different steels, and just to offer so many different options for steels. Not every single knife has the same steel in it, except for almost all Benchmades and almost all Spydercos offer a base model with S30V steel as their base option. And in my opinion, I really like S30V as a base option. It's a really good steel. It's very underrated for, people consider it boring. It's old now, but it's a great stainless steel with great edge retention, and it's pretty tough. It is a little chippy, but the reality of it is, for most people's day-to-day use, S30V is a absolute wonder steel. So all that being said, this is called a reverse Tonto by Benchmade, and it is the funkiest reverse Tonto I think I've ever seen in my life. Personally, I don't really consider this to be a reverse Tonto. This is more like, a strange sheep's foot or a clip point to me. It's really not sheep's foot, because if it was, it wouldn't be flat right here and then curving up at the end. This reminds me a lot more of a clip point than it does a reverse Tonto. To me, a reverse Tonto is more of a shape like the Machine Wise Mojave. That seems to be more like a reverse Tonto to me. A very straight angle right here, like basically the reverse of a Tonto blade. Other options, other styles that have a reverse Tonto, even with a little bit of belly in it, would be like this Cortex XL. Seems to be, like more of a reverse Tonto to me. Maybe argue with me in the comments. Of course, like this episode and comment in it any way you please. But if you think this is a reverse Tonto, explain to me why. I'm all ears. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But typically, I wouldn't think that the Tonto would have this kind of bellied curve right here, and then this is fairly, it's an untraditional reverse Tonto if that's what it is. Anyway, it's a very narrow blade. It's a short blade. It's not, doesn't have much height to it. It's a very long blade though. As a full flat grind, or not a full flat grind, it's like a halfway flat grind, but it's a flat grind. Excuse me, definitely not a full flat grind. Up here it is a full flat grind. Back here it is not. But it is a flat grind. This knife came particularly dull from Benchmade. I don't know if that's a Benchmade thing. Like I said, this is my only Benchmade knife ever. So I don't know. I really don't know if they come sharp or not. But this one did not come sharp. This one was a disappointment as far as the blade sharpness goes. And Spyderco stock out of the box just murdered this knife. As far as, my opinion on future Benchmades go, it seems like you'd have to put your own edge on it. I don't know. Maybe I just got a dud. So 940 Osbourne runs on brass washers, much like Spyderco's, and it has action not too unlike a Spyderco, although I do find that interesting enough, this Omega, this axis lock and its Omega springs does not allow the blade to fall shut when it is opened up. The blade does snap out just fine, but it takes a bit of a whip of the wrist to get this knife to close. Whereas with like the Manix 2, opens up, but when we close the ball bearing lock, the knife just closes pretty much on its own. And I tend to prefer this, but that's not what we're talking about today. It's a very thin knife. It's a very lightweight knife. It is comfortable to carry in the pocket. It has a very nice, robust stainless steel pocket clip. I think the G10 is rather smooth and slippery, and I wish that there was some jimping on the knife right about here, but it is what it is. Has an interesting swedge here at the top of the knife. There's going to be some weight reduction. I do think it looks very cool from the top. I do love this, like the way that the neck looks. When you look down at this knife when you're cutting, I just think that this is a very, very cool look to it. It gets very thin, then comes back out to this kind of diamond towards the tip. And all in all, I like the aesthetic of that. I don't know how I feel about this knife in my hands. It does feel like there's a lot of blade sticking out, like it's a very long bladed knife for where it fits in my hand. There's no choke up point on it. I don't want my finger up here. I'm touching the blade when I do that. So my hand sits back here, although I will say it is very ergonomic back here. This feels very comfortable in my hand. It rests very easily in my hand. I feel very locked in with it. I don't feel like it's going anywhere, even though the scales are kind of slippery. I just wish there was some jimping right here. I really do. It'd be really nice to have some jimping for my thumb right here, and then I think I'd like this knife a whole lot more. Yeah, that being said, it is kind of a fun knife to fidget with. It snaps out fine. It does take a bit of a whip to get it to close, but I imagine back in 2000 and like till rather recently, this was, a very high-tech modern knife, especially in 2000. This was an incredibly modern knife. The axis lock was mind blowing, I'm sure, when it first came out, compared to back locks and liner locks that you're probably seeing at the time. And I think it was very innovative, and it's such a good design that it has lasted for 25 years and is still a great seller for Benchmade. Unfortunately for me, I'm going to be, or fortunately, I guess, because I love the Rec knife blades that Josh makes, I will be removing this blade and adding a custom blade to it. But I do love the fact that this is a comfortable handle. The axis lock is very cool as that it is ambidextrous. You can use it with both hands just as easy, which is probably a reason that this knife also took off at the time, is there probably weren't a ton of perfectly ambidextrous knives. I guess back locks are ambidextrous too. But this just was probably an all-around pretty amazing knife when it came out. Now, this knife retails for $230, and then it goes up to like $300 for the nicer steels and nicer body materials. And there's all kinds of aftermarket support for this knife. You can get all kinds of scales for it. You can get bolsters for it. You can get backspacers for it. There's a ton of modifications you can do to this knife, much like a Spyderco Paramilitary 2 or a Para 3. So if you want to mod a knife, this is definitely a knife you could choose and have a ton of different options. The lightweight of this knife is definitely a plus. If you're looking for a lightweight knife, this would be a very capable knife that is incredibly lightweight and easy to carry. Does not take up much room in the pocket at all. The blade pretty much disappears into the handle. The handle is very compact. It's got a robust pocket clip. All in all, a very easy knife to carry, very thin, and yet still very capable. I can see why this knife has so many fans. So let's compare this Benchmade 940 Osbourne to lots of its competition and see how it stacks up. So the 940 Osbourne, what can we compare it to? Well, as always, we will compare it to Spyderco Para 3 at first. And this knife is longer than the Para 3. That's not a surprise. It is shorter, or less thick than the Para 3. It is less thick this direction and this direction. It has more edge than the Para 3 does, but in my opinion, the Para 3 just feels a bit more robust in my hand, a bit more ergonomic to me, and I just feel like the Para 3 will stand up to more abuse than the Benchmade will. That's just my opinion. I really haven't put this one through the paces yet. I know lots of people are, and it is a strong knife. So next we can bring out the PM2, or the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. And as far as edge length, or the length of the edge goes, these two are very similar. With the Benchmade might even be beating out the PM2 just a little bit as far as length of edge goes. However, they are much closer in sizes to one another. However, once again, the PM2 feels more robust in my hands. I feel like there's more knife in my hand. There's just more here. It's more solidly locked into my hands with the ergonomics, the shape of the handle, the choil on the blade, the jimping on the knife. It all adds up to just being more comfortable and making me feel like I can handle more work with it. But as far as length goes and length of the blade edge, these two are fairly similar, albeit nothing alike in use, in my opinion. Now, I find this to be not a reverse Tonto. These are all reverse Tontos, in my opinion. And I mean, I guess you could argue that they're modified sheep's foot too, but I don't like this curve on the end of it to call it a reverse Tonto. They're just basically talking about this line right here. and that really doesn't make sense to me. Um, I feel like a Tonto has more of like, a line right here and then an edge right here, and the reverse is just flipping that other edge over. Just my opinion, but that's kind of how I feel about the reverse Tonto. I kind of feel like this is more of a clip point. It says more clip point to me, but it's a very narrow, like it has almost no belly for the clip point. Because when we think of clip points, or at least big belly clip points, I think of things like the Rotten Evo 3. Now, this is a huge belly to it. It's a very differently shaped knife. But if we look at, the clip point, that's kind of what I get out of this knife more than reverse Tonto. Same with a knife like, say, the Compadre. Very different knives, big belly down here, but clip. Like I don't Benchmade. I don't see reverse Tonto. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. That's actually a really good possibility. I might not know what I'm talking about. I'm by far a lay person when it comes to this stuff. I'm an enthusiast, but by no means an expert. So that's kind of the gist that I get as far as shape goes from this knife. And I was looking at the edge, and I was like, what knife really has a similar edge to this? And while the Spyderco, the PM2 isn't a ton different, it really isn't. This definitely has a longer straight edge than this does, and the belly is smaller at the end. It definitely does not come down to the same point as the bird skull drop point Spyderco PM2 does. The knife that I actually found had the closest edge to it was a drop point knife. But if we look at just the edge geometry on these two knives, and this is a Grimsmo Rask, it's actually really similar. We have a long straight edge with a slight curve up. Long straight edge, slight curve up. Both are flat grinds. One is much more expensive than the other, and they definitely are not the same blade shape based on the spine, but the look of the edge is what gets me with this knife and this knife. I utilize them very differently. I don't think they feel the same in the hands, but as far as edge geometry goes, that's kind of just my take on it. That's the knife that when I was going through my fairly large collection, I was trying to find something that was similar to this. And this is a very unique knife. And I couldn't find anything that was similar to this. I don't really have any like long, narrow blades like this. Long, kind of short, narrow blades. It's very much a 940 Osbourne thing. And most knives that I had like this were either like Wharncliffes or sheep's foot, or they just weren't really the same, or they had more of a belly down here. It just really, it is very unique. I'll give it that. But that doesn't mean that it is, the best or amazing. And some people, if you go back in YouTube history and you look at through like knife YouTube history, you'll find that this knife has been claimed to be the all-time best pocket knife by many, many different people. And, in 2008, they could have, had a really solid argument. In 2012, they might have still had a pretty solid argument. But once you start getting into the teens and then the 20s, this knife is starting to become a dinosaur, in my opinion. It still has life in it. It does. And it still is utilized. And I think there's still, in my opinion, there's a lot of old heads. Me being one of them. I'm not a spring chicken by any means. But I think a lot of the reason that this knife is around is nostalgia. Not really because it's a superior knife. Is it a bad knife? No. I mean, we still have buck 110s. People still buy buck 110s. People still buy case knives. There's this knife's not going anywhere. Is it a knife to have? If I wasn't getting this reblade, I wouldn't own it. I hate to say that, but if I wasn't getting this REK reblade, I would not own this 940 Osbourne. And the reason I own the 940 Osbourne is so I can put a blade into this frame and these scales. And I probably will even, I'll probably even get rid of the scales. I am just going to, I need the frame, I need the bearings, I'm sorry, I need the washers, I need the access lock. And I have this knife. So it is what it is. I've gotten to check out this knife and I've gotten to expand my palette for knives because, like I said earlier, through and through, I am a Spyderco guy. I'm actually not even a crossbar lock guy. I'm really not the hugest fan of crossbar locks. I don't like the springy detent thing that they do. I'm definitely going to be putting up with it for the REK knives. And there are some knives that I do love with this style lock. And it's almost solely the Manix 2. And I have a couple different Manix 2s. I have the Kukarda as well. I used to have a S110V. But I now definitely prefer this 15V, the CPM 15V with my AWT scales on it. This is one of my absolute favorite Spydercos, if not one of just my favorite knives in my collection. It's definitely a go-to work knife. It is what I consider the best knife that has this style of lock on it. And in my opinion, this knife does not hold a candle to the Manix 2. Sorry, Benchmade bros. Just my opinion. Don't get mad over it. You're allowed to have your own opinion and to think that this knife is better. And I'm okay with that. But I think it kind of falls into like the classic Benchmade tropes of it's overpriced for what it is. It's using kind of older materials that are priced at a very, very high price. I mean, I got this knife. This knife costs me more than this knife. You know, with the exception of my scales, it cost me more than this knife. You know, we're getting into a range of knife, you know, with Benchmade oftentimes that if you want to get, you know, high-end materials that were encroaching, you know, prices that would compete with this knife. And actually, to tell you the truth, this Hinderer Eclipse actually has a very similar, with its hollow ground slicer blade, other than the fact that it's a hollow ground blade, it has a very similar edge geometry to this knife. And I have to give it that. It's another knife that I have found that has, you know, kind of a similar slice to it, although there's a lot more knife here. But what Benchmade does is they charge for G10 and a very, you know, much middle of the line old super steel, you know, prices that don't really fit anymore. You can get a G10 Spyderco knife with the Manix. You can get a Manix 2 in G10 and S30VN for $160. So, you know, we're talking $90 less, or I'm sorry, $80 less than this knife. $70 less than this exact knife. Man, my math was bad right there. Sorry, guys. $70 less than this knife, but still, that's $70. You could almost, you know, you could buy yourself another Civivi with that money. You could save that money and put it into other things. You could buy new scales almost for your Manix 2 at that point and have yourself some custom scales. There's a lot you could do. And there's a lot of knives in the $230 range that, you know, I find more exciting and just an overall better experience than this knife. That being said, I really think this knife has a place in knife history. And I really think that this was a step in knife evolution. Pocket knife evolution definitely owes a lot to this knife. And it's a grandfather of a lot of knives that we have today. And we should respect that. And, you know, we should definitely give Benchmade credit and this 940 Osbourne credit for that. But, you know, it is a grandpa amongst knives these days. But respect to the knife for making it 25 years and still being a model that sells And hey, look, they got my money, so and it's a good enough knife and a popular enough knife that somebody like Josh at REK Blades would be able to grind out a reblade for it and then sell that to enough people that had Osbournes that they want to, swap this blade out for a new high-end modern blade. And I'm really excited for that. And then, tomorrow in the mail, that blade will come, and I'm going to be definitely looking forward to putting it into this knife. But I just wanted to give you guys, a little background history, a look at this knife, and I wanted to give this knife its props while I still had it, because as of tomorrow, this knife is never going to be the same. So look forward to the next episode being the REK 940 Osbourne reblade in Magna Cut. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait to get that blade into this knife. I'm excited for it. Maybe I will even film the disassembly and reassembly and blade swap. Don't hold me to it if I don't, but I will try and get that on camera, and hopefully if it doesn't go terribly astray and I don't have a meltdown swapping out the blade, trying to figure out how to re-put this thing back together. Maybe I'll get that and I'll do a time lapse of it, and you guys can check out how the blade swap goes. So this is the Benchmade 940 Osbourne. It is a classic American pocket knife. It is one of the all-time great American pocket knives, no doubt. Big respect to this knife, big respect to Benchmade. Yeah, all coming from a Spyderco guy. So 940 Osbourne, Benchmade. I'm Garrett from the Cutting Room Knife Review. Until next time, you guys, stay sharp.